Agatha Raisin and the Proposal That Shook Carsely. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Sam, your host, and I'm delighted to have you join me for another captivating tale. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight? Are you relaxing at home, on the go, or somewhere a bit unexpected? Share your answer in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and dive into tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Invitation. Agatha Raisin sat by her kitchen window, the early morning sun spilling across the tidy cottage garden in warm golden patches. The air smelled faintly of dew and freshly baked bread from the neighboring bakery, mingling with the rich aroma of her own steaming cup of tea. Marmalade, her ever-patient tabby, stretched languidly on the windowsill, tail curling like a question mark as she gazed at the fluttering leaves outside. It was one of those mornings that promised nothing more exciting than a quiet day of crossword puzzles and a lingering sip of chamomile. That was, until a soft tap at the door stirred her curiosity. Opening the door revealed a postman with the faintest air of ceremony, holding a single envelope that looked far too refined for everyday correspondence. Agatha raised an eyebrow as she accepted it, noticing immediately the unusual texture of the paper. It was thick, almost velvety, and faintly scented with something floral that reminded her of her grandmother's attic in the spring. The handwriting was equally curious, flowing yet precise, curling at the edges as if the writer had taken a peculiar pleasure in each loop and dash. It was not the sort of letter one expected to receive on a calm Tuesday morning in Carsely. She stepped back inside, closing the door with a soft click, and held the envelope between her fingers as if it were a small, fragile artifact. Marmalade, sensing an interruption in the ordinary rhythm, leapt onto the counter, peering at the letter with inscrutable feline interest. "Well," Agatha muttered, her voice tinged with a mix of amusement and mild suspicion, "you don't get one of these every day. Who could possibly want to involve me in their little ceremonious affairs?" Breaking the seal, she unfolded the letter with deliberate care. Inside was an invitation, formally written, announcing a proposal ceremony to take place at Willowcroft Manor later that week. The phrasing was polite, almost dainty, yet carried an undertone of urgency that made Agatha's curiosity spark. It was the kind of invitation that whispered promises of intrigue while maintaining a veneer of civility. Who had sent it? And more importantly, why had they chosen her? She sat down at the small round table by the window, the letter in one hand, tea in the other, and allowed her mind to wander through possibilities. Perhaps it was a mistake, or perhaps someone thought her skills for observation and deduction could be of service. Agatha's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Well," she muttered to her Marmalade, who responded with a slow blink as if to confirm her owner's hunches were rarely wrong. The village beyond the window seemed unusually quiet, almost in anticipation, though the only movement was the occasional flutter of a bird's wings or the distant clatter of a milk cart. Agatha studied the elegant script again, noting subtle flourishes that suggested both care and secrecy. Every word seemed chosen to entice, to provoke, and to hide a small, tantalizing puzzle. The more she read, the more she felt the familiar thrill of curiosity curl through her like a warm draft. By the time she set the letter down, her morning had shifted subtly. What had begun as a routine day of comfort now carried the quiet promise of adventure. Agatha finished her tea, her mind buzzing with questions, each one beckoning her toward Willowcroft Manor and the enigmatic proposal waiting there. Even Marmalade seemed to sense the shift, hopping down and circling Agatha's feet with a new, almost conspiratorial energy. The quiet village outside her window had not changed, but everything in her own small world suddenly felt as though it might. With a final glance at the letter, Agatha allowed herself a playful chuckle. "Well," she muttered, "this might just be the sort of excitement Carsely has been missing." Agatha slipped on her light coat and stepped into the crisp morning air,
The cobbled streets of Carsely quiet, but alive with faint murmurs and distant laughter. The village had a rhythm all its own, and Agatha knew that on any given day, even the smallest event could spark a dozen interpretations, or half a dozen exaggerations. Today, she suspected, her unexpected invitation would prove fertile ground for curiosity and conjecture. She greeted Mrs. Pettigrew, who was arranging flowers outside the corner shop, her small hands tucked into worn gloves. "Good morning, Agatha," Mrs. Pettigrew said, eyes twinkling. "I hear something quite extraordinary is happening at Willowcroft Manor. A proposal, of all things. I simply cannot imagine who it could involve. Perhaps the vicar, or one of the newcomers." She smiled politely, nodding as she passed. "I imagine the manor itself holds more secrets than we'll ever know," she replied, careful not to reveal her own role. She caught the faintest glimmer of intrigue in Mrs. Pettigrew's expression, a mix of amusement and curiosity, the sort that could fuel village gossip for weeks. Further along, she encountered Mr. Langley, the village butcher, who paused mid-chop as she approached. "Ah, Agatha, have you heard?" he whispered conspiratorially, leaning in as if she were the only person in Carsely who could handle the truth. "They say it's going to be the event of the season. Some say it's purely romantic. Others claim there's more. Money, inheritance, old family feuds, who knows?" His eyes darted toward the corner of the street, as if expecting someone to overhear, adding a theatrical touch to his speculation. I raised an eyebrow. "I dare say, Mr. Langley, your imagination rivals your skill with sausages," she quipped, earning a small chuckle from him. But she made a mental note of his comment. Even the wildest speculation might contain a kernel of truth. As she continued her walk, she passed the village green where children played under the watchful eyes of their mothers. A group of women clustered near the fountain, their heads bent together in animated discussion. Words like scandal, surprise, and unexpected floated to her ears. Agatha observed the subtle hierarchy of the group. The oldest, sharpest-eyed woman seemed to direct the flow of gossip, while a younger mother nodded vigorously, eager to absorb every detail. Agatha noticed a peculiar pause when a well-dressed gentleman passed by. The women exchanged a glance, barely concealed but loaded with meaning, hinting at a connection she couldn't quite place. Turning down a quieter lane, she saw old Mr. Bramble, the village historian, peering through his spectacles at a stack of ledgers outside his shop. "Ah, Miss Raisin," he called, voice faint but deliberate. "If you're to attend this ceremony, I advise caution. Willowcroft Manor has a history of unexpected happenings." He tapped a finger against his temple, eyes twinkling as if sharing a secret only partially revealed. Agatha chuckled to herself, intrigued by the mixture of concern and gossip surrounding the upcoming proposal. Every conversation, every glance, seemed to carry a story beyond the words spoken. She paused by the bookshop, noticing a scrap of paper tucked beneath a potted plant, half hidden, as if someone intended it to be found, yet not quite. Picking it up, she saw an initial scribble. "Not all as it seems." Her pulse quickened slightly, curiosity sparking as she pocketed it for later consideration. By the time she returned to her cottage, the village had already filled her head with snippets, suspicions, and small mysteries. Each encounter had painted a vivid portrait of Carsely's eccentric, gossip-loving residents and suggested, in subtle ways, that the proposal would ripple through the community far beyond what anyone expected. Agatha poured herself another cup of tea and settled in her favorite chair, marmalade curling in her lap, already sensing the promise of intrigue on the horizon. With a contented sigh, she mused aloud, "Well, Carsely never fails to surprise, does it?" Even in the quiet comfort of her home, the gentle hum of village gossip lingered, carrying secrets, questions, and the quiet thrill of anticipation into the morning.
Chapter 2. The Manor and the Mystery. The gravel crunched beneath Agatha's shoes as she approached Willowcroft Manor, its tall, ivy-clad walls rising against the pale morning sky like a secret waiting to be told. The manor had an air of dignified age, with weathered stone and ornate gargoyles peering down from corners, their expressions both watchful and oddly amused. Agatha paused at the wrought iron gates, taking in the overgrown garden, where roses tangled with wild thyme, and a solitary fountain gurgled with hesitant splashes. It was charming, yes, but there was a whisper of something untamed beneath the beauty, an invitation to curiosity as much as ceremony. She pushed open the heavy door, the hinges groaning in a way that made her imagine a history of long-forgotten guests and whispered conversations. Inside, the entrance hall stretched high, with polished oak floors that reflected the soft morning light streaming through tall arched windows. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down from gilded frames, each seeming to guard its own secrets. Agatha felt a familiar thrill, a mixture of delight and mild apprehension, as she realized the manor itself was a character, its every corner potentially hiding a clue or a story. A bell tinkled softly as she stepped further inside, and a tall gentleman appeared from the shadows of a nearby corridor. He had a refined presence, with dark hair streaked with silver, and eyes that sparkled with a mixture of charm and discretion. "Miss Raisin," he said smoothly, bowing slightly. "Welcome to Willowcroft Manor. I trust your journey was pleasant." Agatha inclined her head, studying him with careful interest. "Most agreeable, thank you. The manor is impressive." Her gaze swept over the room again, noting the subtle oddities, a vase that seemed to lean as if observing her, a small sculpture of a fox tucked behind a grand piano, and an intricate carpet pattern that appeared almost too deliberate in its meandering design. Each detail whispered secrets, inviting closer inspection. As she was led toward the drawing room, Agatha glimpsed the other guests. There was an elderly lady with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority, a young man fidgeting with a silver pocket watch, and a middle-aged couple who exchanged smiles that seemed slightly rehearsed. Each person carried a subtle tension, a suggestion that civility masked private motives. Agatha filed the observations away, noting that the proposal would be surrounded not only by ceremony, but also by hidden agendas. The drawing-room itself was a study in contrasts. Rich velvet drapes framed the windows, allowing sunlight to fall in soft pools across antique furniture. Bookshelves lined one wall, overflowing with volumes in neat disarray, and an ornate chandelier hung above, its crystals catching the light like fragments of ice. A faint scent of lavender lingered, mingling with the earthy aroma of old wood and polished brass. She took it all in, sensing the quiet anticipation that seemed to hang in the air, a delicate tension that suggested every object, every guest, was part of a larger story yet to unfold. As she settled into a high-backed chair, her host offered a cordial smile. "Please, make yourself comfortable. The ceremony will begin shortly." Agatha inclined her head, her mind already weaving threads between the manor, the guests, and the invitation that had brought her here. She noticed a slight twitch in the young man's hand, a glance exchanged between the couple, and the way the elderly lady's eyes lingered on a certain corner of the room. Each detail promised intrigue, and her curiosity deepened. The manor felt alive, almost as though it were observing her as much as she observed it. Agatha sipped her tea quietly, aware that beneath the polite smiles and gentle chatter, mysteries were unfolding. She smiled to herself, her anticipation tinged with amusement. Willowcroft Manor had welcomed her, and she was ready to explore every shadow, every secret, and every subtle clue that might reveal what the proposal would truly entail.
Agatha moved gracefully through the drawing room, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests with the practiced curiosity of someone accustomed to reading the subtle language of human behavior. The murmur of polite conversation mingled with the faint tinkling of the chandelier's crystals, creating an ambiance that was both refined and slightly tense. She offered cordial smiles and nods, receiving responses that ranged from warm amusement to guarded civility. Already, she could sense the intricate web of relationships forming beneath the surface of polite introduction. The elderly lady with sharp eyes, whom Agatha later learned was Lady Pembroke, observed the room with calculated patience. Her lips curled ever so slightly when she caught the young man, Mr. Harrington, fumbling with his silver pocket watch. Agatha noted the way he glanced around, as if expecting disapproval, and the subtle shift in the middle-aged couple's posture, a fleeting expression of mild disdain crossing their faces. Even small gestures, a whispered comment here, a careful laugh there, seemed laden with significance, and Agatha made mental notes for later reflection. Her host approached, the charming gentleman from earlier, and offered her a cup of tea. "I trust you are finding Willowcroft accommodating?" he asked, his tone smooth yet carrying a subtle weight. Agatha tilted her head slightly, sensing a hidden implication. "Quite," she replied lightly, raising an eyebrow, "though I suspect the manor may hold more surprises than even its most elegant furnishings reveal." He allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips, his eyes glinting with a cryptic understanding that suggested he knew far more than he let on. As Agatha circulated, she engaged in conversation with several guests, each interaction revealing small but telling details. The middle-aged couple, Mr. and Mrs. Fenwick, spoke in carefully measured tones, yet their hands twitched with impatience when another guest mentioned the upcoming proposal. Lady Pembroke's sharp eyes flicked toward a distant corner of the room whenever someone spoke of family legacies, suggesting knowledge of secrets that had been buried for years. Even Mr. Harrington's nervous glances hinted at a concern that went beyond mere social awkwardness. Agatha's attention shifted to a large, ornate desk tucked beneath a bay window. A single sheet of paper rested on it, slightly angled as though placed hastily and then forgotten. She couldn't resist glancing at the top, where a few elegant words were scribbled. "Observe carefully. Appearances deceive." Her pulse quickened slightly. Whoever had left this note clearly intended for someone to notice, yet it carried the subtlety of a puzzle, a warning, or perhaps an encouragement to pay closer attention. The social currents of the room were almost tangible. Agatha noticed how certain guests clustered together, sharing quiet asides, while others hovered at the periphery, observing rather than participating. Small tensions flared in polite smiles, fleeting frowns, and the occasional tilt of a head. There was humor here, too, soft and understated, as she exchanged a witty remark with a young woman whose laugh betrayed both charm and curiosity. Each encounter added a brushstroke to the larger picture, a tapestry of relationships, motives, and secrets woven into the fabric of the manor. By the time she returned to the corner where she had started, Agatha's mind was alight with observations and questions. The proposal, she realized, would not simply be a formal ceremony. It would reveal hidden motives, unspoken rivalries, and perhaps even truths long concealed. Her host's cryptic comments, the carefully placed note, and the subtle interactions of the guests had set a stage layered with intrigue. Agatha sipped her tea once more, smiling faintly to herself. Willowcroft Manor promised more than elegance. It promised a mystery, waiting to be discovered in the delicate folds of civility and the quiet tensions beneath polite conversation.
Chapter 3. Secrets Behind Smiles. Agatha wandered quietly through the drawing room, careful not to draw attention to herself, though with her natural poise she could hardly be called inconspicuous. The room seemed alive in its own subtle way, the hush of whispered conversations weaving around the rich scent of polished wood and lavender. She paused near a low bookshelf, pretending to examine the neatly stacked volumes, when she caught the faintest murmur from the corner where Lady Pembroke and Mrs. Fenwick had gathered.
"And I assure you," Lady Pembroke's voice was low but firm, "this proposal is more than a mere formality. Some people underestimate the consequences of such events. Old grievances have a way of surfacing at the least convenient moment." Agatha's curiosity prickled. Consequences? Old grievances? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suppressing a small smile at the way polite words could veil real tension. She moved a few steps further, careful to remain within earshot without appearing intrusive. Mr. Harrington, the young man with the silver watch, whispered something to the middle-aged Mrs. Fenwick, whose response was a soft huff, almost inaudible. The exchange was too brief to grasp fully, yet the tone suggested irritation mixed with concealed urgency. Her eyes drifted to the ornate furnishings, as if seeking guidance from the room itself. A bronze statuette of a fox sat on a side table, one paw raised, as though in warning or mischief. Nearby, a gilded picture frame tilted slightly, revealing a photograph of the manor's previous owner, an expression on his face that hinted at secrets tightly held. Agatha made a mental note. Items in this room seemed to carry subtle messages, as if the manor itself were whispering to those observant enough to listen. Agatha strolled closer to a faintly open door leading to a smaller salon. Through the crack she glimpsed the vicar, speaking quietly with a woman whose identity she did not recognize. "You know what will happen if he discovers the truth," the vicar said, his hand gesturing slightly. "We cannot afford another scandal. Not now." Agatha's lips quirked in amusement. The vicar's grave tone, combined with a hint of anxiety, made her imagine him pacing a secret room somewhere, fretting over the implications of what only he seemed to know. She made a note of this as well. So many pieces, so many half-spoken words, each a thread in a tapestry she intended to unravel. Returning her attention to the main drawing room, she noticed Marmalade would have approved of the way a small sunbeam fell across a particular corner, highlighting an unopened letter tucked beneath the edge of a velvet armchair. She refrained from touching it, but her curiosity danced. The manor seemed to enjoy these little games, scattering hints and puzzles in plain sight, inviting only the keenest observer to connect them. A quiet chuckle escaped Agatha as she imagined herself narrating these observations for her own amusement. Each whispered phrase, every subtle glance, and peculiar arrangement of objects fed her natural delight in piecing together human behavior. She could almost hear Marmalade's imaginary commentary, an unspoken agreement that nothing in this manor was merely decorative. As she meandered back to the center of the room, she caught Lady Pembroke's eyes, sharp and assessing, briefly meeting hers. Agatha inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Perhaps the older woman had noticed her eavesdropping, or perhaps she was merely testing another guest's response. Either way, the moment added another layer of intrigue to the atmosphere, a gentle tension that made the room feel cozy and electric simultaneously. By the time she settled near a window with her tea, Agatha felt both informed and entertained. The drawing room had whispered its secrets, each fragment intriguing but incomplete, and she savored the anticipation of discovering how they might connect. Here, among portraits, statues, and careful conversations, the stage was set. The manor, the guests, and the subtle currents of concealed motives promised a story as layered as the afternoon sunlight filtering through the tall windows, warming her cheeks and stirring her curiosity all at once.
The room fell into a hush as the host, standing near the grand fireplace, cleared his throat. Agatha straightened, a quiet thrill running through her, the sort of anticipation that accompanied the first note of a symphony, calm yet charged with potential. The guests turned their attention to him, expressions polite, expectant, yet subtly revealing their inner thoughts. Some faces glimmered with curiosity, others with guarded suspicion, and a few betrayed a flicker of unease. Agatha noted each one carefully, the beginnings of a mental map taking shape in her mind. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, his voice smooth and deliberate, I thank you all for attending today. We gather for a matter that promises both delight and perhaps revelation. A proposal will take place shortly, and while it is presented as an act of affection, it carries significance beyond its immediate appearance. A ripple passed through the room. Lady Pembroke's sharp eyes narrowed slightly, as if calculating the implications, while Mrs. Fenwick's lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Harrington shifted in his seat, fingers brushing the silver chain of his watch nervously. Even the younger guests, outwardly smiling, exchanged glances that suggested questions unspoken. Agatha felt a familiar thrill. The undercurrents of tension were palpable, and she knew better to not accept appearances at face value. The host's gaze swept across the room, briefly lingering on Agatha herself, a subtle tilt of his head that seemed almost imperceptible. She returned his look with a small, knowing smile, acknowledging his cryptic gesture without revealing the ripple of curiosity it stirred within her. There was something deliberate in the way he conducted this announcement, a quiet orchestration of reactions. Small, almost imperceptible gestures, a hand brushing a silver candlestick, a pause near a portrait, a glance toward the mantel, seemed calculated to provoke thought, to spark attention without drawing overt notice. As the murmurs of speculation began, Agatha moved gracefully toward a corner where she could observe without being intrusive. Guests whispered, some in excitement, others in concern. The vicar leaned toward Lady Pembroke, whispering urgently, while Mr. Harrington appeared to wrestle with a sudden tension in his shoulders. Agatha's sharp eyes caught Mrs. Fenwick's subtle hand movement toward a hidden compartment in her handbag, a motion almost imperceptible, but suggested she anticipated the announcement's effects more personally than most. The host continued, outlining the ceremony with careful words. He said, "This proposal, while honoring tradition, may reveal aspects of history and character that some may wish remained private. I trust discretion and observation will guide us all." His phrasing was measured, yet it carried the thrill of a veiled warning. Agatha's mind raced, cataloging small details, the rise and fall of voices, a lingering glance toward the window, a small frown quickly masked by a polite smile. Each reaction hinted at secrets poised to surface. As the conclusion, a soft murmur of speculation filled the room. Agatha remained quiet, noting how some guests leaned in toward one another, exchanging barely audible words, while others sat rigidly, eyes fixed on the host, as if trying to decipher a code in his manner. Even Marmalade, if she had been present, might have observed the intricate dance of human behavior, and known that every smile, every polite nod, concealed a layer of expectation, excitement, or fear. By the time the room's energy settled into anticipatory silence, Agatha had compiled a mental list of observations. Who seemed genuinely curious, who masked apprehension, and who appeared to know more than they admitted. She sipped her tea subtly, letting the suspense ripple through her, her mind already plotting how she might piece together the unfolding story. The proposal, simple in appearance, promised to ripple far beyond the manor's walls, carrying implications for relationships, loyalties, and perhaps even the quiet balance of Carsley itself. Agatha leaned back in her chair, a faint smile curling her lips. Everything was as it should be, quiet, polite, and yet charged with secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves.
Chapter 4. Clues and Confusion. The manor library was quiet, the air tinged with the faint scent of aged paper and polished oak. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm rectangles across shelves stacked high with books of every size and age. Agatha wandered between the rows, her fingers grazing the spines with deliberate curiosity, savoring the soft crackle of pages and the gentle hush of the room. Marmalade's imaginary presence at her side would have nodded approvingly. There was something inherently promising about the secrets a library concealed. Her attention was drawn to a thick leather-bound volume whose cover was faded and worn, titled Chronicles of Willowcroft. She pulled it from the shelf and carefully leafed through the yellowed pages. noticing handwritten annotations in the margins, decades-old musings of someone who had clearly known the manor intimately. As she reached the middle of the book, a small slip of paper, tucked neatly between two pages, caught her eye. Its edges were slightly frayed, and the handwriting was elegant yet hurried, curling with a deliberate flourish that suggested secrecy. Agatha extracted the note and held it up, the sunlight illuminating a few words written in careful ink. Observe carefully. What seems ordinary may conceal much. Some will watch, others will mislead. Trust only what you discern yourself. She felt a familiar thrill, that mix of amusement and curiosity that always accompanied a puzzle in plain sight. Who had written this? And why had it been left here so deliberately hidden, yet accessible to someone perceptive enough to notice? She glanced around the library, noting the towering shelves, the faint imprint of a recently moved chair, and the small, curious objects arranged on the reading tables, an ornate magnifying glass, a delicate bronze figurine, and a folded handkerchief embroidered with initials she did not recognize. Each seemed mundane, yet in the context of the note, every item hinted at intention, subtle messages woven into ordinary details. Agatha's mind raced, connecting threads between this cryptic message, the letter that had brought her here, and the reactions of the guests she had observed. She allowed herself a small, wry smile. "Well, Willowcroft, you do enjoy a bit of intrigue." Her voice echoed lightly off the high ceilings, a private amusement in a room meant for secrets. She carefully tucked the note into her coat pocket, deciding not to reveal it just yet. Some mysteries, she knew, revealed their purpose only when the time was right. As she continued to browse the shelves, Agatha's sharp eyes caught a faint crease in the binding of another volume, suggesting something had been removed, or perhaps returned incorrectly. The thought made her pulse quicken ever so slightly. Every detail mattered here. Even the smallest irregularity might signal intention, warning, or misdirection. She felt a thrill not unlike following footprints in the snow, each step revealing potential clues, while keeping her guessing about what lay ahead. The quiet of the library amplified the tension, but in a cozy, absorbing way. Agatha moved with deliberate care, aware of the balance between observing and intruding. She imagined the manor's past inhabitants, the echoes of their voices brushing against the walls, perhaps amused at her investigation, perhaps warning her silently. There was no overt danger, yet the note's subtle hint of caution suggested stakes higher than she had first considered. By the time she closed the book and placed it back on the shelf, Agatha's mind was alight with possibilities. The note, the guest's behavior, and the cryptic gestures of her host were forming a delicate puzzle she was eager to solve. She left the library with a sense of quiet anticipation, footsteps light on the polished floor, aware that every conversation, every glance, and every seemingly insignificant detail could carry meaning. The proposal promised more than ceremony. It promised secrets waiting to be discovered, and Agatha intended to uncover them all.
Agatha found herself drifting toward the window seat, where the afternoon light spilled warmly across the cushions. A few guests lingered nearby, their expressions reflecting the same quiet curiosity she felt. Lady Pembroke, surprisingly approachable when not wrapped in formality, gave a small nod, and Mr. Harrington's anxious energy seemed slightly tempered in her presence. Agatha decided to seize the opportunity. "It appears some of us are more observant than others," she said lightly, her tone inviting without revealing too much. A small conspiratorial smile passed between Lady Pembroke and Agatha. "Indeed," the older woman murmured, "I have noticed several inconsistencies in behavior that merit attention. One cannot rely solely on appearances here." Agatha's lips quirked in amusement. Lady Pembroke's directness was refreshing and oddly reassuring. Across the room, Mr. Harrington shifted his weight nervously before joining their whispered circle. I thought I saw something earlier," he admitted, glancing toward the corner where the velvet armchair had concealed that enigmatic note. "A detail that didn't quite add up. Perhaps it means nothing, but it nagged at me."
The trio exchanged observations, each adding small fragments of information. Agatha spoke of the host's subtle gestures, Mr. Harrington recounted brief glimpses of furtive glances, and Lady Pembroke mentioned a misplaced object that had struck her as deliberate. Together, the pieces began to form a tentative pattern, though much remained mysterious. Each discovery sparked more questions than answers, but the gentle thrill of collaboration made the afternoon pleasantly engaging. Amid the seriousness of observation, moments of humor surfaced. Mr. Harrington, in an attempt to imitate the host's cryptic hand gestures, knocked over a delicate statuette. Lady Pembroke stifled a chuckle, and Agatha allowed herself a quiet laugh, the sound merging with the soft rustle of the curtain. Even in a manner filled with secrets, camaraderie offered a comforting warmth, a reminder that curiosity could be shared without fear of judgment. Yet beneath the laughter, Agatha sensed subtle caution. Each of her companions, though willing to exchange insights, carried a careful wariness. Not every smile could be trusted, and not every piece of information came without bias. She noted small inconsistencies in their recollections, minor exaggerations, or fleeting expressions of anxiety, signs that personal motives might intertwine with the pursuit of understanding. By the time the light shifted toward evening, Agatha felt a strengthened sense of purpose. She had allies, however tentative, who shared her inquisitiveness and desire to uncover the truths hidden within Willowcroft Manor. The trio's whispered strategizing had illuminated corners she might have overlooked alone, yet it also reminded her that caution remained essential. Trust was selective, timing was delicate, and each subtle discovery brought both clarity and new questions. As they returned to the larger drawing room, Agatha allowed herself a quiet satisfaction. The alliances she had formed were small but meaningful, each adding a layer of perspective to the unfolding mystery. The proposal was still shrouded in ambiguity, yet the gentle camaraderie, combined with sharp observation and discreet humor, promised a pathway forward. Together they would navigate the delicate dance of secrets, piecing together hints, while savoring the cozy, suspenseful intrigue that Willowcroft Manor offered.
Chapter 5. The Proposal Day. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Willowcroft Manor, illuminating the soft bustle of preparations for the day's ceremony. Agatha stepped into the grand hall, immediately noting the meticulous arrangements. Flowers perfectly aligned, candelabras polished until they caught the light, and chairs positioned with deliberate symmetry. Everything was ordered to project elegance and civility, yet she sensed the undercurrent of tension weaving through the calm exterior. Even in such beauty, secrets whispered from every corner. Guests moved about with practiced poise, some chatting politely, others casting furtive glances toward one another. Lady Pembroke oversaw the arrangement of seating with precise authority, murmuring instructions in a voice that brooked no argument. Mr. Harrington fussed nervously with a silver cufflink, glancing repeatedly at the entrance, as if expecting someone or something to disrupt the delicate balance. Agatha, observing all with a mixture of amusement and curiosity, made a mental note of every gesture, every twitch of expression. On a side table, she noticed a small object that seemed oddly out of place. A crystal bird perched atop a stack of velvet cushions. Its presence was almost comical amid the otherwise stately decor, yet she suspected it had been positioned intentionally, perhaps to catch the eye or serve as a subtle signal. Agatha tilted her head, imagining the myriad possibilities, a message to one of the guests, a distraction, or simply an eccentric flourish designed to provoke speculation. The staff moved silently around the room, adjusting drapes and fluffing cushions, their careful choreography lending a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the human participants. Agatha sipped her tea, already warmed, and allowed herself a faint smile. She found a quiet delight in observing the layers of behavior, how the polite smiles often concealed unease, how whispered words carried weight despite their softness. and how the smallest gestures hinted at personal stakes that went far beyond the ceremony itself. Agatha wandered toward the window, noting the garden beyond, where rose bushes had been trimmed to perfection and a fountain gurgled with rhythmic precision. Even nature, it seemed, had been enlisted to support the pretense of tranquility. Yet she caught a flicker of anxiety in the gardener's expression as he adjusted the final arrangements, a tiny slip, almost imperceptible, that suggested the day's events could provoke unforeseen reactions. Agatha's attention returned to the gathering guests. Each had adopted a posture that balanced elegance with readiness, their expressions carefully managed. A subtle glance between Mrs. Fenwick and a neighboring attendee revealed mild impatience masked by civility. Lady Pembroke's eyes scanned the room with a mixture of amusement and scrutiny, as if she knew more than she allowed to show. Even the host, standing near the hearth with a composed smile, carried an energy that suggested both anticipation and calculation. Taking in the scene, Agatha felt a thrill of both amusement and alertness. The manner, the arrangements, and the carefully orchestrated behavior of each guest created a living puzzle. Every detail mattered, and every interaction had the potential to reveal a hidden layer of truth. Agatha settled into a quiet corner, tea in hand, ready to observe the ceremony as it unfolded. Today, she mused, would be a day of pretense, revelations, and subtle surprises, and she intended to notice them all.
The guests gathered in the sunlit hall, their murmurs fading into a hush as the ceremony began. Agatha moved through the crowd with ease, positioning herself so she could observe without appearing intrusive. The room was a study in anticipation, smiles carefully measured, hands lightly fidgeting with gloves or napkins, and eyes darting with curiosity or concealed anxiety. Even the polished wood of the floor seemed to vibrate with the quiet tension of expectation. The host stepped forward, clearing his throat with a faint flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are gathered to witness a union that carries significance, both personal and consequential." His choice of words drew subtle reactions. A barely perceptible glance exchanged between Lady Pembroke and Mrs. Fenwick, a slight stiffening in Mr. Harrington's shoulders, and a faint twitch of amusement at the corners of the host's own lips. Agatha raised an eyebrow, noting that every subtle shift could conceal meaning. As the ceremony unfolded, small peculiarities drew her attention. A velvet cushion slightly out of place, the gleam of a crystal ornament reflecting sunlight in an unusual pattern, and a faint rustle near the back of the room, all hinted at something more than mere formality. She suspected that not all guests were as preoccupied with etiquette as they appeared. Some movements seemed deliberate, perhaps signals or subtle warnings. Agatha filed each observation mentally, the thrill of quiet detection threading through her amusement. A gentle wave of humor passed over her as she noticed an overly enthusiastic usher attempting to straighten chairs, repeatedly tripping over his own feet. Guests tittered politely, exchanging discreet smiles, while the tension beneath remained untouched. Agatha allowed herself a soft chuckle, sensing that even in formality, human nature could not help but surface. Her eyes wandered among the attendees. Mr. Harrington's nervous glances had not abated. He kept returning to a particular corner where a small folded handkerchief rested atop a low table. Lady Pembroke's gaze, sharp and calculating, darted toward a series of portraits lining the hall, faces frozen in oil, yet somehow, Agatha felt, aware. Even the host's gestures were precise, yet carried the subtlest hints of misdirection, as though he were orchestrating attention while leaving the true moment hidden. Agatha's thoughts danced between observation and deduction. Each smile, each whispered comment, each tilt of the head might conceal motives or reveal clues. She noted which guests seemed genuinely interested in the ceremony, which were distracted, and which were quietly calculating. Even minor details, the misalignment of a ribbon, the flicker of sunlight on polished silver, the way someone's sleeve brushed a chair, were catalogued, woven into a growing map of subtle interactions. By the time the proposal's first moments approached, Agatha felt both anticipation and amusement. The ceremony was a delicate interplay of decorum, personal stakes, and tiny signals of hidden agendas. She sipped her tea subtly, savoring the tension and quiet humor, knowing that the smallest gestures could foreshadow surprises. Willowcroft Manor, with its polished floors, whispered portraits, and carefully arranged guests, had set the stage perfectly. Agatha's sharp eyes and wry observations promised that nothing, no glance, no gesture, no detail, would escape her notice as the proposal unfolded.
Chapter 6. Revelations and Rumors. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Willowcroft Manor, casting a warm glow over the assembly. Agatha observed quietly, her mind alive with the fragments of information she had gathered in the days leading up to this moment. Subtle glances, half-spoken phrases, and the careful positioning of objects now began to form a coherent picture. Secrets, once hidden behind polite facades, were beginning to surface, and Agatha felt the familiar thrill of discovery stirring within her. Her attention first returned to Mr. Harrington, whose nervous energy had been impossible to ignore. As he shifted in his seat, Agatha recalled the cryptic note she had found in the library, the one that warned, "Observe carefully, appearances deceive." A connection sparked in her mind. Harrington's glances toward the velvet armchair and the folded handkerchief now made sense. He was not merely anxious, but actively concealing evidence of his own involvement in the proposal's underlying intrigue. The realization was both satisfying and quietly alarming, as she began to see how personal motives intertwined with the ceremonial facade. Lady Pembroke, meanwhile, moved through the room with the ease of someone accustomed to navigating complex social currents. Agatha noticed the subtle way she nodded to certain guests and offered fleeting, coded remarks that seemed to guide behavior without overt instruction. Her sharp eyes caught the slight stiffening of the Fenwicks whenever Lady Pembroke's gaze lingered, suggesting that old tensions and rivalries were surfacing under the guise of civility. Agatha's mind raced to piece together which historical grievances might influence today's proceedings, recalling whispered village tales and snippets of past gossip. A faint laugh drew her attention to the host, who had approached a group of younger attendees with an almost imperceptible air of mischief. "The smallest gestures often reveal the grandest truths," he murmured, words layered with ambiguity. Agatha's sharp mind noted the remark for later reflection, interpreting it as both a clue and a warning. Every smile, every tilt of a head, and every carefully placed object now seemed laden with potential meaning. Her eyes drifted to the corners of the room, where minor details previously overlooked suddenly seemed significant. The crystal bird on the velvet cushion, the slightly tilted portrait above the fireplace, and the edge of a folded letter peeking from a guest's pocket all appeared part of a subtle choreography, a web of intention linking people, objects, and secrets. Agatha quietly catalogued each element, aware that piecing together the puzzle required both patience and observation. Amid the unfolding revelations, gentle humor kept the atmosphere cozy. A minor stumble by the usher elicited discreet smiles, and a whispered comment about the host's theatrics brought a quiet chuckle to Lady Pembroke and Agatha alike. Even as motives were revealed and suspicions confirmed, the matter retained its charm, blending tension with the warmth of human idiosyncrasy. By late afternoon, Agatha had formed a mental map of alliances, secrets, and personal stakes. She realized that the proposal was not merely an isolated event, but a catalyst, illuminating the hidden dynamics between guests and exposing intentions long obscured.
Her sharp observations allowed her to anticipate reactions and interpret subtle cues, creating a sense of quiet satisfaction as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. As she sipped her tea and surveyed the scene, Agatha felt both amusement and anticipation. Willowcroft Manor, with its elegant rooms and intricate social web, had revealed much, yet the true climax, the moment when all secrets converged, remained just beyond the edge of perception. She leaned back slightly, content in the knowledge that curiosity, attentiveness, and gentle deduction would soon bring everything into focus.
The afternoon sunlight softened across the manor's drawing room, yet the calm was deceptive. Whispers, once restrained, now moved like ripples across the polished floors. Agatha noticed the subtle shift immediately. Guests who had been politely reserved began leaning toward one another, exchanging statements tinged with curiosity, disbelief, or veiled judgment. She sipped her tea, her eyes flicking between faces, cataloging the delicate chaos that had begun to unfold. "Did you hear what Lady Pembroke implied?" Mrs. Fenwick whispered sharply to a nearby companion. "I cannot imagine she meant it literally." Her companion's eyebrows shot up, eyes darting toward the vicar, who was attempting to maintain a neutral expression. Agatha noted the irony. The vicar, always so composed, now the center of speculation, simply by association. Mr. Harrington's voice trembled slightly as he defended a minor action he had taken earlier, inadvertently contradicting another guest's recollection. The contradiction sparked murmurs of laughter, some polite, some incredulous, as small tensions surfaced. Agatha quietly stifled a chuckle, amused at the human tendency to dramatize trivialities while concealing more meaningful motives. Even within the gentle chaos, she noted, valuable information could be gleaned. Lady Pembroke, ever observant, glided between small groups, her sharp eyes catching inconsistencies. She posed carefully phrased questions, eliciting answers that often revealed more than intended. Agatha admired the strategy, recognizing the subtle dance of social power. Each remark, each gesture, created ripples that exposed character, alliances, and occasional deception. She scribbled mental notes, integrating the fragments with what she had already observed. A particularly humorous misunderstanding occurred near the window. A young guest misheard a comment about the proposal's history, reacting with exaggerated alarm. Several nearby guests attempted to clarify, only to produce more confusion. Agatha's internal commentary was sharp yet gentle. Even the smallest misstep can illuminate truths, or at least produce delightful spectacle. She allowed herself a quiet smile, enjoying the mixture of tension and light-hearted chaos. Through the gossip and minor confrontations, patterns began to emerge. Subtle alliances revealed themselves in shared reactions or quick exchanges of glances, while some statements, deliberately ambiguous, hinted at hidden agendas. Agatha's eyes lingered on the host, whose serene demeanor masked amusement at the unfolding events. It became clear that some guests were manipulating information, consciously or unconsciously, testing loyalties and gauging responses. By the time the initial flurry of whispers subsided, Agatha had distilled key observations. The conflicting statements, humorous blunders, and revealed quirks painted a more complete picture of motives and relationships. Suspicion, amusement, and revelation coexisted in a delicate balance, each detail feeding the growing anticipation of what the proposal would ultimately disclose. Settling into a quiet corner, Agatha sipped her tea again, her mind weaving together subtle clues and emerging patterns. She felt the thrill of understanding without premature certainty. Willowcroft Manor had transformed from a stage of polite observation into a lively theater of personalities, secrets, and emerging truths, each interaction sharpening her insight and preparing her for the revelations yet to come.
Chapter 7. The twist. The quiet hum of conversation in Willowcroft Manor's main hall was suddenly punctuated by the soft jingle of the front door. Agatha looked up, her curiosity instantly piqued. Through the doorway appeared a figure she had not seen before. A tall, impeccably dressed stranger with a calm, measured gait. The newcomer carried an air of quiet authority, and yet there was a spark of mischief in the way their eyes scanned the room. Gasps and whispers rippled through the assembled guests. Lady Pembroke's sharp gaze narrowed with suspicion, while Mrs. Fenwick let out an audible sigh that seemed part exasperation, part intrigue. Mr. Harrington straightened abruptly, his fingers tightening around the silver chain of his watch, betraying the subtle unease that had been building throughout the afternoon. Agatha, however, simply tilted her head, savoring the thrill of an unexpected variable in the intricate social web. The stranger offered a polite nod, acknowledging the guests without explanation. "I trust I am not late for the important matters of the day," they said, voice smooth and layered with faint irony. Agatha caught a subtle smirk from the host, a twitch of amusement in response to the cryptic tone. The new guest's presence immediately disrupted the carefully maintained balance of alliances and rivalries. Subtle glances exchanged between attendees revealed shifting calculations, and a gentle tension settled over the room. Agatha's eyes swept across the faces of those present. Lady Pembroke's posture stiffened, a warning flicker in her eyes as though anticipating a revelation. The Fenwicks exchanged a look that suggested they had not expected to contend with yet another player in the unfolding drama. Even the host, usually so in command, allowed the faintest crease of surprise to touch his brow before smoothing it into composed politeness. It was a momentary crack in the Manor's polished veneer, one Agatha observed with keen interest. The newcomer moved gracefully into the circle, offering handshakes and subtle bows. Their words were measured, yet each phrase seemed designed to provoke thought and scrutiny. "It appears there are secrets that prefer to linger, even in the light," they remarked casually, eyes twinkling as if daring someone to challenge the statement. Agatha noted the reactions, a slight wince from Mr. Harrington, Lady Pembroke's narrowed eyes, and the almost imperceptible twitch of Mrs. Fenwick's lips. Clearly, this guest carried knowledge, or at least the aura of knowledge, that would complicate everything. A quiet ripple of humor passed through Agatha's mind. She imagined Marmalade perched somewhere nearby, tail flicking in approval at the sudden stir of intrigue. Even in the midst of tension, there was a cozy charm to the way personalities jostled, alliances recalibrated, and whispered assumptions collided with the unexpected. She allowed herself a small, private smile, noting that the Manor had once again proven to be more than a backdrop. It was a stage, alive with observation, deduction, and subtle theatrics. As the stranger continued to circulate, offering casual observations and asking pointed questions, Agatha catalogued the effects. Each reaction revealed character traits and hinted at hidden agendas. She noticed small gestures, a hand hovering near a concealed letter, a faint tightening of a smile, a whispered exchange at the periphery of the room that might indicate prior knowledge or silent maneuvering. Every subtle shift became a clue, every ripple of surprise a potential insight into the forthcoming proposal. By the time the newcomer paused near the fireplace, the room had subtly changed. Old alliances had been tested, previously unnoticed tensions exposed, and the quiet undercurrent of suspense strengthened. Agatha settled back slightly, her mind racing with possibilities. The unexpected guest had arrived, and with them, the balance of the day's events and the secrets of Willowcroft Manor shifted once again.
The hall grew quiet, the chatter fading as the host signaled that the moment had arrived. Agatha took her place slightly to the side, observing rather than participating, aware that the unfolding events would reveal more than any conversation or whispered speculation. Every guest's posture, every half-smile and glance now held potential significance. The air hummed with anticipation, a delicate mix of excitement, anxiety, and restrained amusement. The host cleared his throat, his eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a conductor ready to cue the finale. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the proposal you have awaited is not as simple as it appears. Please observe carefully." A murmur ran through the guests. Agatha's attention sharpened. The phrasing, measured yet teasing, suggested layers yet to unfold. The unexpected guest from earlier stepped forward, producing a small envelope. There was a brief, almost imperceptible tension as they handed it to the host, who opened it with a deliberate flourish. Inside was a carefully worded declaration, not of romantic intent, as many had anticipated, but a proposition involving the stewardship of a local charity, one with long-standing ties to the village. Gasps and suppressed laughter mingled. Lady Pembroke's eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Harrington exhaled audibly, and Mrs. Fenwick's polite facade cracked with a small, delighted smile. Agatha noted subtle reactions with precision. Some guests had anticipated the announcement and masked their amusement with civility, while others were caught off guard, revealing honesty in their startled expressions. Small gestures, clasped hands, a slight bow of the head, and the discreet exchange of knowing glances conveyed alliances and loyalties in ways words could not. Even the host allowed a faint, approving smile to surface, the gentle acknowledgment of successful orchestration evident in the crease of his eyes. The charm of the moment lay not only in the surprise, but in the human responses it drew forth. A younger guest whispered to a neighbor, pointing discreetly at the envelope, eliciting soft laughter that rippled through the room. Lady Pembroke and the unexpected guest exchanged a subtle nod, suggesting mutual respect and acknowledgment of shared strategy. Agatha recognized the quiet satisfaction in these small interactions, proof that intentions, when revealed tactfully, could delight rather than disrupt. As the ceremony concluded, Agatha reflected on the intricate web she had observed over the days. The cryptic notes, subtle gestures, whispered gossip, and shifting alliances had converged into a clear picture. She felt a satisfying sense of closure, coupled with the gentle amusement that came from understanding both the human and strategic elements at play. Every detail she had catalogued, the misplaced handkerchief, the curious crystal bird, the nuanced glances, had contributed to a fuller understanding of motives, alliances, and outcomes. With the proposal complete, laughter and conversation resumed, richer for the shared revelation. Agatha sipped her tea, smiling quietly at the warmth, intrigue, and humor that had permeated the manor. Willowcroft had delivered its secrets gracefully. The day blended suspense and amusement, curiosity and resolution. She allowed herself a contented sigh. The village, the manor, and its eccentric, fascinating inhabitants had offered yet another puzzle, and this one, at last, had resolved beautifully. Chapter 8. Closure and Cozy Reflections. Agatha's boots crunched softly along the winding path back to her cottage, the evening air crisped with the scent of fallen leaves. Carsley seemed to have settled into its usual quiet rhythm, the village shops glowing warmly through their windows, and the faint aroma of baking bread drifting from the bakery on the corner. Despite the serenity, her mind replayed the day's events in vivid detail, each interaction at Willowcroft Manor flickering through her thoughts like a carefully arranged tableau. Returning to her cottage, she set down her coat and kettle, allowing herself a moment to exhale.
Marmalade, if he had been with her in spirit, would have padded alongside her, tail flicking in approval at the return to familiar comfort. Agatha perched in her favorite armchair, the fire crackling gently, and let her reflections flow. The proposal had been far from what anyone expected, a revelation that had turned polite anticipation into shared amusement and subtle insights about character and motive. She smiled at the memory of the unexpected guest's smirk, the careful arch of Lady Pembroke's eyebrow, and Mr. Harrington's flustered attempts to remain composed. In her quiet cottage, Agatha allowed herself to assess the fallout. Friendships had subtly shifted. Alliances formed in whispers at Willowcroft Manor now carried into everyday village life. She imagined the various conversations that would ripple through Carsely in the coming days, soft laughter mingling with pointed observations about who had said what, and who had truly known more than they revealed. Each villager's quirks, once a source of private amusement, now seemed to carry an additional layer of significance, and Agatha's mind catalogued them with a blend of curiosity and affection. The manor itself lingered in her thoughts, not just as a setting, but as a character in its own right. The hidden corners, the deliberate placement of objects, and the quiet gestures of the host and guests had all contributed to the unfolding drama. Agatha mused that such orchestrated intrigue was almost an art form, and though she had uncovered many secrets, she suspected that some threads remained subtly concealed, waiting for another attentive observer to notice them. She brewed a fresh cup of tea, the warm steam curling around her hands, and allowed herself a gentle laugh at the day's minor absurdities, the minor stumbles, the whispered misunderstandings, and the delicate maneuvering of pride and politeness. Even amidst revelations, human nature had shown in its full, charming complexity. Agatha appreciated that the humor, the suspense, and the quiet triumphs of observation had blended seamlessly, offering a satisfying conclusion without ever tipping into melodrama. As the village settled into evening, Agatha gazed out the window. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys, lanterns flickered along cobblestone streets, and the distant hum of conversation drifted from the pub on the corner. Carsely was at peace, yet she sensed that life would continue to ripple with small surprises, subtle alliances, and gentle intrigue. She made a mental note to check in on a few neighbors in the morning, partly out of curiosity, partly out of the affection she held for the village's eccentric rhythms. Finally, Agatha leaned back, cup in hand, and allowed a soft, contented sigh to escape. The day had brought revelations, laughter, and insight, but it had also reminded her why she loved the subtle mysteries of Carsely. There was comfort in the familiar, delight in the unexpected, and always the quiet pleasure of observation. The village, her friends, and even its occasional chaos promised that life remained engaging, cozy, and endlessly intriguing. Agatha smiled, eyes half closed, knowing that while this chapter had concluded, the tapestry of secrets, humor, and curiosity would continue to unfold, one gentle moment at a time.
The sky over Carsely blushed with the colors of sunset, soft pinks and warm golds spilling across the rooftops. Agatha settled into her favorite armchair by the window, a fresh cup of tea in hand, and watched the village exhale into evening. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint clatter of shutters closing mingled with the gentle hum of distant laughter. It was the kind of evening that made the heart feel light and the mind wander, blending comfort with quiet curiosity. Marmalade, ever faithful in spirit if not in presence, seemed to approve of the calm. Agatha imagined him perched on the window-sill, tail flicking with mild amusement at her reflective state. She let a small smile curl across her lips as she thought of the day's events, the unexpected guest,
the cleverly orchestrated proposal, and the ripple of gossip that had now begun to settle into familiar rhythms. Each revelation, each subtle maneuver had added a layer to her understanding of both people and the delicate social fabric of Carsely. The gentle glow of lanterns began to appear along the cobblestone streets, casting long shadows and painting the village in warm, honeyed light. Agatha's thoughts drifted to her neighbors. Who had quietly smiled, who had displayed a hint of envy, and who would likely whisper stories long after the manor's doors closed. She noted with wry amusement that even in small villages, human nature ensured the presence of secrets, subtle rivalries, and tiny, delightful surprises. The day's events had illuminated these truths beautifully. A soft draft carried the faint scent of wood smoke and roses from nearby gardens. Agatha leaned back, savoring the sensory comfort that accompanied contemplation. She reflected on the lessons learned. Observation was an art. Kindness could temper curiosity, and humor was an essential companion to even the most suspenseful moments. There was satisfaction in knowing that while some mysteries had resolved, a few threads remained gently unresolved. A folded note, a curious glance, a minor contradiction in recollection, leaving space for future intrigue. Her gaze lingered on the horizon as the final light faded, blending into dusky lavender and indigo. Carsely seemed to sigh with contentment, the village exuding warmth and familiarity that contrasted with the excitement of the day. Agatha's thoughts were playful, wandering to imagined scenarios. What next challenge might arrive at Willowcroft Manor? Which neighbor would inadvertently reveal another secret? Or what small oddity might draw her attention in the days to come? The possibilities felt endless yet reassuring. Finally, she allowed herself to settle fully into the quiet embrace of the evening. Tea warm, thoughts alive with curiosity, and a faint smile lingering. Agatha felt the comforting balance of closure and anticipation. The village exuded coziness. The mysteries had left their mark without unraveling serenity, and she was perfectly content to watch the world transition gently into night. Somewhere, a lamp flickered, a distant cat mewed, and life in Carsely hummed softly onward. Agatha raised her cup in a silent toast to quiet reflection, new beginnings, and the enduring charm of her beloved village, ready for whatever subtle surprises the future might bring.